Growing up, I have always had the same dream over and over again. I am standing on the banks of a huge river playing with a girl. We are laughing and playing around, and then suddenly she holds my hand and pulls me towards the river. But before we enter the river, I wake up, and I never remember the face of the girl. The dream was always the same until it suddenly changed when I turned 15. I remember telling my mom about this dream when I was around 10 years old, and she told me dreams didn't mean anything and are not real. She said that if I get bad dreams, I should just pray and go back to bed, and that nothing would happen to me. The year I finished junior high school, I was forced to live with my grandmother. She lived alone in an old house on the outskirts of my hometown. The house was isolated on a little hill, surrounded by trees, and was about 20 minutes away from town. I have always wondered why she wanted to stay in a place like this all alone. My grandmother was a very strange woman who gave me eerie vibes, and I have never liked being around her. She was blind in one eye, and sometimes she talked to herself as if she were talking to someone. She hardly smiled and didn't talk a lot. She grew herbal medicine at the back of her house and sold it to the people of the town. She didn't seem interested in anything else and was always cooped up in her house. I used to live in my hometown when I was younger, until my dad got transferred to the city. My mom wanted my grandmother to come with us since she was all alone, but she refused. My mom once told me that my grandmother has never left our hometown. For some reason, she doesn't want to. After we left, we came back once in a while to visit her, and her house always gave me the creeps. We never slept there. We just visited her and left. Sometimes during these visits, I would catch my grandmother staring at a corner of her house as if she was looking at someone. When I looked at the same corner, I wouldn't find anything. She was just a strange woman. That year, I had gone out with some friends to a party, even though my parents had warned me not to go. I left the house while they were sleeping, but unfortunately, by the time I came back, my dad was in my bedroom waiting for me. After the lashes and insults, they told me the next day that I was becoming stubborn and disrespectful since I was moving with the wrong crowd. As a punishment, they decided to send me to my grandmother's place to spend the rest of the year with her till I was ready to go to senior high school. They said she was old and needed the help. I begged them not to make me go there and promised that I wouldn't disrespect them again. I was willing to do anything to avoid going to my grandmother's house, but all my pleas fell on deaf ears. Their minds were made up. 2 days later, I was forced to pack my bags, and my mom drove me straight to my hometown. As we stood in front of my grandmother's house about to enter, I looked up, and for a second, I could swear I saw a little girl looking at me through the window. She looked very familiar. I looked again, and she was gone. I turned to my mom and asked her if anyone stayed there with my grandmother, and she said no, and that for as long as she could remember, my grandmother had always stayed there alone. I told myself I had just imagined the little girl in the window. At that point, I had just accepted my fate. I was staying with my grandmother for 3 months, which felt like an eternity, but I had no other option than to pray that the days would pass quickly until it was time for me to leave. And I didn't think much of it until I found out the identity of the girl I have been seeing in my dreams. That night in bed, my dream changed. I saw the girl once more, but this time she was standing on the opposite bank of the river, looking at me. My grandmother's house was strange, and not just because of its isolation. There were always a sense of unease around it. The floors creaked as if someone was walking when no one was there, and shadows seemed to move on their own. The air was often thick and cold, even when the sun was shining and everywhere was hot. Sometimes I heard whispers or distant conversations, but every time I would check, there was nothing. My grandmother hardly spoke to me, and I spent all my time alone reading. As I spent more time there, I found an old photo album of my grandmom in the living room. As I flipped through the pages, I was startled to see a picture of the girl I saw in the window. And that was when I realized why she was so familiar. She was the girl from my dreams. She was standing next to my grandmother as children. I went to my grandmother and asked her about the photo. And after a long silence, with tears in her eyes, she revealed that the girl was her sister who had tragically drowned in the river when they were little. A few days later, I received news that a group of my friends who I used to hang out with had a car accident on their way home from a party. They had been drinking and one of them died. I stopped having the dreams after that incident, and up until today, I still don't know why I kept dreaming about my grandmother's dead sister. A friend I told this story to recently told me that maybe she was just appearing in my dreams to protect me because everything is just so strange. When I told my grandmom that I was seeing her sister in my dreams, she just said it means I'm blessed because her sister was a good person. I have not dreamt about her ever since. Sometimes I think about it and I don't understand it at all. I just wanted to share this story and ask, do you believe that spirits can intervene in our lives to protect us, or do you think it is all a series of coincidences?